the 4 years that stretched from April 1917, when the United States entered the First World War, until the end of Woodrow Wilson's presidency, March 1921, we saw in this country the greatest assault on civil liberties since the end of slavery. Here are some of the things that happened in that time. We had roughly 1,000 Americans sent to prison for a year or more, and a far larger number sent for shorter periods of time solely for things that they wrote or said. We had press censorship on a huge scale. The United States government, in effect, shut down roughly 75 newspapers and magazines because it didn't like what they were saying. This press censorship was begun with the excuse that we were at war, but it continued for 2.5 years after the war ended. Ironically, just to bring back the connection to today, Donald Trump in his presidency used to rail against the media and called the press the enemy of the American people. He wasn't able to shut them down, but Woodrow Wilson did so. And moreover, the person who managed his press censorship program was the Postmaster General, who operated out of the building that 100 years later became the Trump International Hotel.
Yeah, you talk in the book, and I remember it striking me that it was pretty naked. In other words, they used the postal system as a way to destroy the magazines and so on that needed to use the postal system to get to their readers were blocked from using it. And it was a direct government rendering it impossible for critical voices to be heard.
Yeah, the law gave the Postmaster General the power to declare a publication unmailable. It couldn't travel through the US mail. Now, this didn't affect mainstream daily newspapers, which were sold on street corners and delivered to people's homes, but they, by and large, supported the government pretty enthusiastically. But it did affect weeklies, monthlies, journals of opinion, and the vast majority of the country's foreign language press, because before the internet, before radio and TV, there was no other way of reaching subscribers spread around the country except through the mail. And the Postmaster General who carried out this program for Woodrow Wilson, Albert Burleson was his name, was a former congressman from Texas, extremely right-wing, an ardent segregationist. His family had actually owned 20 slaves at the time that he was born. He was the son and grandson of Confederate veterans. The very first newspaper he shut down was a socialist weekly in Hallettsville, Texas, which had exposed how on land that he owned, Burleson had leased the land to the Texas prison system, which worked it with prisoners in striped uniforms who were beaten when they, didn't pick the cotton fast enough. He swiftly shut that paper down, and then he went after much better known targets, the leading one of which, best known of which, was the magazine The Masses, which was really the best monthly in the country at that time. It published John Reed, was edited by Max Eastman, published Edna St. Vincent Millay, Sherwood Anderson, the young Walter Lippmann, who was in his socialist phase at that point. And it was shut down because censors objected to some of the things that it carried, one of them being a cartoon that showed the Liberty Bell crumbling.
Yes.